The tragic case of Ryan Zimmerman, a search for identity that ended in mystery for years. The case of Ryan Zimmerman remained a chilling mystery, a man in search of his true self who ultimately paid with his life. The investigation lay dormant until a chance discovery brought it back into focus. On the afternoon of January 5, 2016, a person walking their dog along the west side of Grand Lake St. Mary's State Park in Mercer County, Ohio, came across what they believed to be human bones and called the authorities. The caller told police, "I may be totally off my rocker, but I was just out walking my dog and came across some bones that looked to me to be human." Investigators confirmed that the remains were indeed human. However, they represented only part of a larger body. The bones recovered included a significant portion of the torso but were missing all parts from the elbows and knees down. The skull was also notably absent. Forensic examination revealed saw marks on the bones, indicating that the victim had been dismembered. Deputies and state investigators launched an intensive search for additional remains and evidence. A forensic anthropologist concluded that the bones belonged to a male, estimated to be between 20 and 35 years old. The remains were sent to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's Forensic Biology Lab for DNA extraction in hopes of identifying the victim. While the DNA extraction was successful, it yielded no matches in existing databases, leaving the case cold. It wasn't until 4 years later that a break finally came. In 2020, criminal intelligence analyst Jennifer Lester was reviewing missing person cases in Columbus when she stumbled upon a file for a 22-year-old man who had vanished. In 2015, crucially, his family's DNA had never been submitted for comparison. Investigators reached out to the man's parents in Corbin, Kentucky, and once DNA samples were collected, a match was confirmed. In June 2020, the remains were positively identified as those of Ryan Zimmerman. Now that they had a name, detectives needed to learn more about Ryan's life to uncover who might have harmed him. According to his father, Ryan was reported missing on November 17, 2015, after Columbus authorities notified the family that his car had been impounded, yet they couldn't get in touch with him. Ryan had told his family he was moving to Columbus in August 2015 to live with friends. He last spoke to them on September 25, and his car was impounded just 2 days later. Ryan was described as someone who loved video games, cartoons, and spending time with his younger brother. But as the investigation progressed, detectives uncovered a part of Ryan's life that had remained hidden from his family. He had posted a personal ad on Craigslist expressing a desire to explore a submissive female role in a relationship. It became clear that Ryan had been exploring his identity in private, possibly meeting people discreetly through online platforms. This revelation raised further questions about who Ryan may have met and trusted in the months before his death. While his identity was finally confirmed, the investigation into who was responsible for his brutal killing remains ongoing. The case of Ryan Zimmerman, a search for identity. A life cut short as investigators delved deeper into Ryan Zimmerman's life following the discovery of his dismembered remains in 2016. They uncovered a painful and complex journey of identity, relationships, and betrayal. Ryan, a 22-year-old from Corbin, Kentucky, had been quietly exploring the possibility of transitioning to a female gender. His online activity revealed searches related to hormone therapy, voice training, and shopping for women's clothing. These details, uncovered by Jennifer Lester of the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, painted a fuller picture of a young man trying to understand and express his true self privately and carefully. Lester analyzed Ryan's Google searches, phone records, and social media activity, which eventually led to the name Lowray Emerson, a screen name Ryan had connected with online. That person turned out to be Corey Buzzard, a married man living in Columbus, Ohio. In August 2015, Ryan moved from Corbin to Columbus and began living in an apartment with Corey's wife Sarah Buzzard, and a third individual named Naira Whitaker, a transgender woman. The living arrangement was complicated. Ryan was romantically involved with Corey, while Sarah was in a relationship with Naira. By late September, tensions flared. Corey no longer wanted Ryan to live with them and asked him to leave. During the weekend of September 25th to 27th, Corey left the apartment to visit another person in Athens. Ryan, desperate to stay, turned to Sarah for support, but he was never seen again after that weekend. In November 2015, Sarah and Corey filed for divorce. 2 months later, their marriage was officially over. Less than 2 weeks later, Sarah married Naira. Years passed before a breakthrough finally emerged. In July 2021, investigators searched the Columbus apartment where Ryan had lived with Corey, Sarah, and Naira. Mercer County Sheriff Jeff Gray stated that law enforcement was able to track the Toyota Corolla believed to have been used to transport Ryan's remains. The car, which had been traded shortly after the crime, was located through computer records and tested positive for traces of human blood. Blood was also found in the apartment. On August 25, 2021, Sarah Buzzard was arrested in Marion, Indiana, and charged with multiple offenses related to Ryan's death, including abuse of a corpse, grand theft auto, and evidence tampering. Later that same day, police attempted to arrest Naira Whitaker at the couple's home. As officers arrived, Naira shot herself in the head. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Following her arrest, Sarah confessed. She told investigators she had grown angry at Ryan for what she saw as the breakdown of her marriage with Corey. She said arguments with Ryan were frequent and intense. According to her account, Ryan was told he needed to leave. He was only there for Corey's purpose, not hers. Sarah told police that she and Naira decided to get rid of Ryan while Corey was away. When Ryan exited the bathroom, Sarah attacked, placing him in a chokehold and holding it long after he lost consciousness. She claimed that Naira assisted in dismembering Ryan's body in the bathtub, cleaning up afterward, and disposing of the remains. Ryan's body parts were scattered across multiple locations in Ohio, including dumpsters at gas stations in Grand Lake St. Mary's State Park, where his torso was ultimately found. Despite the tangled relationships, police and prosecutors later confirmed that Corey Buzzard was not a suspect. A grand jury indicted Sarah Buzzard in September 2021 on a long list of charges: 2 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, as well as counts of assault, abduction, tampering with evidence, grand theft auto, possessing criminal tools, and abuse of a corpse. In January 2022, Sarah Buzzard pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated murder in Mercer County Common Pleas Court as part of a plea deal. All other charges were dropped, and she avoided the possibility of a death sentence. On January 20th, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years on court. Sarah read a statement expressing regret. "Not a day goes by that I do not wish for a chance to take it all back. I accept responsibility for the role I played in Ryan's death, and I will live every day for the rest of my life attempting to redeem myself through positive actions and deeds." The tragic case of Ryan Zimmerman remains a stark reminder of how the search for identity can intersect with vulnerability and of how trust placed in the wrong people can have fatal consequences. Wilford Morton, a family's 67-year search for the truth. For decades, a family in West Virginia held on to hope, searching for answers about a husband, father, and grandfather who vanished without a trace in 1954. Wilford Morton was just 27 years old when he disappeared. He left behind his wife Opal and their 4 children, vanishing into what felt like thin air. Wilford had transitioned from the harsh life of coal mining to working as a long-haul truck driver. His job involved driving to South Bend, Indiana, to load trucks with stewed Baker's canned goods and delivering them to dealerships throughout the Carolinas on a route that typically lasted 2 weeks. But one day, he simply never came home. Opal, concerned and confused, called his employer in Indiana only to be told that Wilford hadn't worked for the company in 4 years. It was a devastating and baffling revelation. Their oldest daughter, Anna, was just 7 years old when she last saw her father. She remembers watching him wave goodbye that day, unaware it would be the last time. The years passed, and so did the hope, though it never completely faded. Generations later, that enduring mystery became personal for Kay Bruce, Anna's granddaughter. A criminal justice major at the University of Toledo, Kay was determined to solve the riddle before her grandmother passed away. "Unsolved mysteries like that just eat at me," Kay said. "How can someone just disappear and fall off the face of the earth?" Her determination paid off thanks in part to an unexpected source. On August 21, 2021, the YouTube channel Mysterious WV aired a missing persons segment on Wilford Morton. The story caught the attention of viewers, including someone named Edward, who contacted the show's producer Sean McCracken with critical information. Edward provided details about when, where, and how Wilford died. A 1956 newspaper article was found describing a fatal car crash on Route 56 in Norfolk, New York. Wilford Morton had died in that accident just 2 years after he vanished. The long-lost truth was finally uncovered. Wilford had died young, far from home, and was buried in Pine Grove Cemetery in the town of Norfolk, New York. Anna, now elderly, reflected on the discovery. "There was a part of me that always thought he would be 95 today. I figured if we found out at this point, he probably wouldn't be alive anymore, but to learn he passed so young, that was very hard." She continued, "Even if he were alive today, I always knew he would know where we were on, yet he never reached. When we came to that realization, we would stop searching, but somehow, we'd always start looking again." After 67 years, the Morton family finally has closure. "The great-granddaughter told me Saturday night they were already in tears," said producer Sean McCracken. "And I was, quite frankly, on cloud 9. What began as a mystery endured for generations, but in the end, a family's unwavering love and persistence brought the truth home at last." The Saturday Night Strangler, a cold case that haunted South Wales' Sandra Newton, had been out with her boyfriend in Britain Ferry when she disappeared during a short 5-minute walk home around 1 a.m. 2 days later. Her body was discovered in a ditch near a coal mine in Tonmore. She had been indecently assaulted, struck on the head, and strangled with her own skirt. Her body was left at the entrance of a culvert, with little effort made to conceal it. The location suggested that the killer had detailed knowledge of the area. Police believed Sandra may have tried to hitchhike home and that a local man, familiar with the remote dump site, was likely responsible. Just 2 months later, another chilling double murder shook the region. On a night out in Swansea, 16-year-old best friends Geraldine Hughes and Pauline Floyd decided to hitchhike home. Their bodies were found in woodland near Landarsea, only 7 miles from where Sandra had been discovered. Both girls had been indecently assaulted, beaten, and strangled. It appeared one had tried to escape. She had made it within yards of a nearby road, and close to where her father worked, but was caught and killed. These brutal crimes against teenage girls triggered one of the largest manhunts in Welsh history. A force of 150 officers interviewed more than 35,000 people. Witnesses described a man between 30 and 35 years old, with bushy hair and a mustache, seen driving a light-colored Mercedes 1100, the same car the girls were last seen entering the night they disappeared. The region, unaccustomed to such violence, was stunned. Communities were gripped by fear, and the grief was overwhelming. Despite the intense investigation, no arrests were made, and no strong suspects emerged. The man known as the Saturday Night Strangler remained at large at the time. Police believed the same man was responsible for all 3 murders. However, lacking modern technology and facing a flood of paperwork with no computerized systems, they pursued Sandra Newton's case separately from the murders of Geraldine and Pauline. Sandra's boyfriend, the last person to see her alive, was the prime suspect in her case. He maintained his innocence and was never charged. It would take nearly 30 years for the investigations to be linked. In the early 2000s, South Wales Police reopened the cases as part of a cold case initiative, hoping advances in forensic science, particularly DNA analysis, could identify the killer. Investigators isolated male DNA from the clothing of both Geraldine and Pauline, confirming the same individual was responsible for both murders. However, there was still one major obstacle. The DNA profile did not match anyone on the recently established national database. But the breakthrough was coming. The breakthrough: how DNA unmasked the Saturday Night Strangler for nearly 3 decades. The identity of the man who killed Sandra Newton, Geraldine Hughes, and Pauline Floyd remained a mystery. But a new forensic inquiry cracked open the cold case that had haunted South Wales since 1973. The major breakthrough came when forensic scientists tested Sandra Newton's underwear and found a male DNA profile. Dr. Colin Dark, a forensic expert, immediately recognized a unique feature in the DNA that matched the samples recovered from Geraldine and Pauline. "I recognized straight away this was the same perpetrator. This was a bombshell," Dr. Dark said. It proved a serial offender had been operating in South Wales in 1973, targeting young girls. Crucially, it also proved Sandra's boyfriend, long suspected due to being the last person to see her alive, was completely innocent. Detective Inspector Paul Bethel, who led the renewed investigation, stated, "This was the first time in almost 30 years we knew definitively that the same man was responsible for all 3 murders. However, the DNA did not match anyone in the UK's national DNA database." With no direct leads, investigators turned to the BBC programme Crime Watch to appeal for public help. At the same time, Dr. Dark and his team were working on a new, untested idea: familial DNA analysis. "We started to think, is it possible to identify the offender through their children?" Dr. Dark recalled. "You inherit DNA from your parents and pass it on to your children. So we pulled thousands of profiles from men in South Wales and began matching using just a pencil and ruler. The team manually cross-checked profiles, narrowing down thousands to around 100 partial matches. These men could be the children of the unknown killer." It was a groundbreaking moment, the first use of familial DNA in a criminal investigation in the UK, and possibly the world. Meanwhile, investigators had also narrowed their original pool of 35,000 suspects down to 500. They focused on men who matched the suspect's physical description, had access to a light-colored Mercedes 1100, and had a history of violent or sexual offenses. One surname stood out: Kappen. A local man named Paul Kappen had DNA on record from recent offenses in the Port Talbot area, but he was only 7 years old in 1973. However, his father, Joseph William Kappen, had been questioned back in 1973. He matched the witness description and had driven a light-colored Mercedes 1100. At the time, he claimed his car was broken down on the nights of the murders and presented an alibi from his wife. Detective Inspector Bethel recalled, "He was known as a thug in the community, had a record of domestic violence, and had served time in prison." Paul Kappen's DNA showing a 50% match. His father Joseph became the prime suspect. But there was a major obstacle. Joseph Kappen had died of lung cancer in 1990, aged just 48. To confirm their suspicions, police obtained DNA from Kappen's ex-wife and daughter. These samples gave them 2/3 of a full profile. The match was strong but not complete. Investigators wanted absolute certainty before naming him the killer and giving closure to the victims' families. That meant exhuming Kappen's body. For this, they needed permission from the highest authority, the Home Secretary. Then Home Secretary David Blunkett gave his approval, stating it was a big step. "You have to be sure you have enough evidence, because if you get it wrong, the families would rightly be aggrieved. But we needed the truth." In May 2002, shortly after midnight, the exhumation began at a cemetery in South Wales. It was a horrible night. Dr. Dark remembered as we reached Cappen's coffin, a thunderclap struck. It felt like evil had been identified. It sent shivers down my spine. In 2003, forensic DNA testing at Mariston Hospital in Swansea confirmed what investigators suspected. Joseph William Cappen was the Saturday Night Strangler. Cappen had evaded justice for decades. Born in 1941 and raised in the industrial town of Port Talbot, he came from a troubled home. After his parents' divorce, he was raised by a stepfather and began running afoul of the law from age 12 by adulthood. He had racked up over 30 convictions, including for car theft and petrol theft. Despite his criminal record and violent reputation, he had slipped through the cracks. His alibi in 1973 was never challenged, and no one could have known then that DNA decades later would bring the truth to light, thanks to the determination of a new generation of detectives, groundbreaking forensic science, and the perseverance of the victims' families. One of the UK's most notorious cold cases was finally solved, proving that even after death, the past can catch up with those who thought they'd escaped justice.